The Solar Podcast is brought to you by Continental Energy Solutions. I'm Tim Montague, your host. Today on the Solar Podcast, single-axis trackers are beginning to dominate the ground mount solar industry globally. My guest today is Steve Daniel, Executive Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Solar FlexRack, a global racking company. Welcome to the show, Steve.
Hey, Tim, thanks so much for having me. I really looking forward to our conversation.
We here at Continental have started to get our hands on Solar FlexRack with your single axis tracker. You also have ballasted ground mount and fixed ground mount solutions, obviously. But we're going to spend the bulk of our time today talking about single axis trackers just because they have become so important to the ground mount solar industry. Before we dive into FlexRack's product line, give us a little background on yourself and how you got into the solar industry.
Sure. Well, thanks for the question. And again, thanks for having me on. So I started getting interested in solar a long time ago. I was attending UMass in Amherst at the engineering school back in the late 70s, believe it or not. And there was a gentleman named Dr. Hieronymus, was one of the professors there. He was actually a former sailor. So he had all this wind data about sailing off the east coast of Massachusetts in the Northeast. And he started proposing kind of large scale wind units, windmills to be placed in the ocean. And he actually started the program at UMass about alternative energy. So we were exposed to solar and wind energy very early on. I was pretty amazed that you could turn photons into electrons and thought that was a really cool thing. And I actually wrote a paper for one of my classes on this. So I did some research way back when and kind of looked where the investments were. I realized that there wasn't a real market for solar at the time, but I got hooked on this very early on, and I always had an interest in doing that. So I was in high tech for about 20 years or so, 25 years. I worked in computer companies like Digital Equipment Corporation, Sun Microsystems, SGI. And then in 2007, I decided to leave high tech and to focus on solar. So I've been in the solar industry for 13 years now. I started my career in Los Gatos, where I live, with a company called Akina Solar, working for Barry Cinnamon. He's a pretty prevalent guy in the industry, and I learned quite a bit from Barry. And I just had coffee with him yesterday, and we talked solar for about an hour yesterday. So it's in my blood. I love what we're doing, and I really enjoy the industry and having a great time for myself.
For any of our listeners and viewers who don't know Barry, Barry is a bit of an OG in the solar industry. He has a wonderful podcast and called The Energy Show. And he's just a really smart, passionate solar industry professional there in the Bay Area. So we're grateful for his work. And that's cool that you guys are so connected. I didn't know that.
Yep, we are. He had his new bike he wanted to show me. So he rode his bike over to Pete's down the street, and we had a cup of coffee and chatted about solar for a bit.
So you have, you're there in the Bay Area, and we would be remiss if we didn't mention the weather and the fires that you've had this year. How is all that playing out? Is the fire season over now?
Well, we're actually getting really high winds today and tomorrow, so there's a real fire danger. And actually, PG&E had to do some rolling blackouts just to make sure that certain lines weren't electrified when the wind came by. So it has been a really difficult summer. The fires are really hot. They're very intense. We had a lot of smoke locally. As we talked about before, I'm a biker, and there was a couple of weeks where you just didn't go outside and bike. So we seem to be getting through that now. Hopefully we don't get another set of fires. All of the big ones have pretty much been put out. There was one to the west of us over in Santa Cruz and one to the east in the East Bay. So we were pretty much surrounded by it, but hopefully we're in the clear, but there could be some issues this week with the high winds.
Yes, with wind comes potential grid problems and grid outages. So that's a real headache. And that's one of the, cool things about solar and storage now is that it does offer consumers resiliency potentially from those disruptions. But let's get into it. So many solar racking manufacturers are going after this fast growing tracker segment, but few have truly succeeded. Mm-hmm. What do you think sets Solar FlexRack apart from other racking makers?
Yeah, so first, the parent company, which is Northern States Metals, has been in continuous operation for over 47 years. So we're a very stable, well-financed, well bankable company. And we've been in solar for over 10 years. So as you know, we started in fixed tilt because that was the predominant technology back then. We cut our teeth. We built outstanding products that are really well respected and accepted in the marketplace. And really to differentiate ourselves, we realized we needed to build kind of a world-class engineering and field services delivery team. So we spend an awful lot of our time building out that team. We have a full engineering team that we use to leverage our designs and installations. And we've learned a lot from fixed tilt, which is transferred directly to trackers. Products are really solid. We have over 250 installations now of trackers in North America. And that part of the business is now actually 50% of our company, whereas 3 or 4 years ago, it was really zero. So we've experienced really solid growth, really great acceptance in the marketplace. And we see that only growing as far as the product mix goes. We're still selling plenty of fixed tilt, but as you know, trackers are now expanding into the Northeast, the Midwest, the far West, so and also into Canada. So we're seeing installations across all of North America at this time.
When you look at that evolution from, being a strictly ground mount fixed manufacturer to breaking into trackers, and you're up against the big dogs in the room, Next Tracker and Array Technologies. What was that transition like for Solar FlexRack?
It was remarkably not that difficult because everything we had done on the fixed tilt side, as far as product design, building out our engineering processes and how we assess a site, were fully transferable to the tracker side. The initial design was our TDP, which we still market today. That was mostly for smaller sites, and then we already came up with the TDP 2.0 a few years ago. So we offer 2 different products, and once we got in the marketplace and started getting installations, of course, first year is a little bit challenging because you got to get client acceptance. But we were smart. We went and did a lot of small projects the first year or two, and established ourselves in the Southwest and the Southeast. And as time rolled on and we moved into the colder climates, we found that what we knew about fixed tilt really helped us dealing with wind and snow loads, dealing with difficult terrain, dealing with all the challenges you have in cold climates, geotech challenges as well. Really transferred very well. So we kind of figured that what we knew from the fixed tilt side would transfer very well once the products were designed and tested out. Where we tend to be a very conservative company. We probably over design and over test at certain points, but the result is we have a lot of happy clients, and we have really no failures in the field. So we found the transition to be fairly smooth, and we continue to optimize the products and drive down costs, which is what it's all about at this point.
Here in the Midwest, we've seen trackers come in all the designs starting in 2018, and probably upwards of 90% of the ground mount installations, a megawatt or above, are single axis trackers. How do you see the Midwest market and as a relative share of the tracker market for Solar FlexRack?
We're seeing the same thing, Tim. A lot of what we're quoting now and installing are trackers. We do see some mixed portfolios, which I believe we're working with Continental at this point, where there will be fixed tilt as well as trackers. So that makes the engagement for the client very efficient with us. They like the fact that we can handle both sides of that business. We did a tracker portfolio mixed with fixed tilt last year in Illinois, which was 17 projects. And we went through designing each one of the projects separately and then implementing them. And the client was very happy because it was very efficient for them. They just had to deal with one set of contracts, one set of people. So once we executed the first contract and we had an MSA in place, it was really easy and efficient for them. And that's one of the things we really focus on, is that we can handle a full portfolio. But the predominance of what we're seeing now in the Midwest is trackers as well. And we know that with our really solid geotech team and an engineering team, we know how to handle the difficult climate, the difficult conditions.
When you think about dealing with the very harsh winters that we have here in the Midwest, are there special allowances that you need to make relative to the Southwest or the California market, which of course are very robust markets? But I'm just curious, how do things change when you deal with these very cold, harsh winters, and also hot and humid summers. It is one of the more difficult climates, period, here in the Upper Great Lakes.
Yeah, I mean, you do have all the extremes, and our products are really robust and easily dealt with those. So what you end up seeing mostly in colder climates where there's snow load and wind load, you'll see heftier posts and more posts per se per module. And we're very careful on the kind of design phase of implementing a project. So we make sure we have a very conservative look at the snow and wind loads. We go back to our engineering team in the sourcing team and make sure we have the right materials, the right galvanization. So through our process, I probably mentioned it now, we have civil engineers, mechanical engineers, structural engineers, geotech engineers. We have an electrical engineer and a chemie on staff as well, a geologist as well. So we cover all the bases. And when we do the intake on a project, we have a pretty buttoned up intake form, which your folks dealt with us. And we capture all this, kind of site-specific information up front. Then our project engineer kind of quarterbacks all those different resources. So we make sure that everybody in a process flow touches the project as it goes through. So when we come out with our final design, we are very confident that it's going to withstand all the conditions in the field, that it's been well designed and it will stand the test of time. And I think our reputation, precedes us on this, is that we've got really very good reputation in the marketplace. People keep coming back to us for repeat business, which is always a good sign. So we take everything into account. We do measure everything from the temperature swings to the wind to the snow, and also the resistivity of the soil. If it's a former farm, it could have some interesting chemicals in the farm composition. So we make sure we deal with that effectively. So we really try to check all the boxes as we go through our process. All of this is kind of backloaded into Salesforce. We run our whole company on Salesforce. And those process flows are all codified in Salesforce, so we don't miss a beat. You have to check all the boxes for the quote to be completed and the configuration to be done. So we're very process oriented and very engineering oriented.
I'm glad you mentioned technology like Salesforce, which is a very robust CRM and great for workflows. What other ways does Solar FlexRack leverage technology, both in the design, engineering, and execution of solar projects?
Yeah, great question. So as I mentioned, everything's process flowed, it's codified, so you really can't get out, the quote cannot exit the building without being completed. And we also have our team looking at modern technologies as far as, how we interface with SCADA systems, with the control systems alike. We do provide, through our field services team, we provide on-site training to make sure that the installation crew or the EPC knows how to install the system correctly. We do commissioning on site as part of our project plan. So we'll send out usually a double E to do the commissioning of the system. And he will work with the client to make sure they understand the controls, how to read when things happen to go wrong, they understand what to do if there's an alarm, how do you handle that? And then also, very importantly, how do you interface with the SCADA and the monitoring system? That's a really big piece of the technology. So we pay quite a bit of attention to that, and we want to make that seamless for the clients when they do the engagement with us, that they can turn the system on and effectively run it. Also, the field service engineer develops a relationship with the client during that process. So they have a relationship, a one-to-one relationship. So if an issue does arise, they know to call, Eric, or to call Greg or whoever's on the team, and make sure that they're working with them effectively.
More and more companies seem to be leaning on software and intelligent tracking. How do you see, tracking technology? I mean, this comes into play, for example, early in the day and late in the day when the modules are potentially shading one another. How does SFR approach this?
Yeah, so we have backtracking algorithms that are built in based on NREL data. And so standard out of the box, when we do the commissioning, there's a standard backtracking algorithm that's fit for that site. We also have the ability, if you have rolling terrain, to do some more granular backtracking algorithms per tracker. And so the commissioning engineer can work with the client to try to figure out what's the optimal way of setting up the system, setting up the backtracking algorithm so that they get the most efficiency they can and the most production out of the panels. So that's really done with our team, working with the EPC or the installation crew. And we are also looking into other technologies as well, because there's a lot of information out there, there's a lot of technology being developed. So we're trying to stay on the cutting edge of that as well.
Indeed, indeed. So I want to talk a little more about the Midwest market. You're a Midwest company based in Ohio, and it is still early days for solar here in the Midwest. Minnesota was the first market to really take off. Now Illinois, but we see a lot of utility scale solar coming to Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, perhaps Michigan.
Mhm.
Um, can you paint a picture of what Solar FlexRack is seeing in the Midwest with market development?
We're seeing exactly the same thing, Tim. Again, I think the predominance of the quotes we're putting out in the projects we're executing are trackers. And as I mentioned earlier, the experience we have on the fixed tilt has really enabled us to be very effective on the tracker side. But that demand is growing. We knew 4 or 5 years ago, as we were really getting into the tracker market pretty early on, we were talking with a lot of the consultants, and they were very clear. They said, this is a Southwest product now. You'll start seeing it in the Southeast next year. It'll creep its way up the seaboard, and you'll eventually be into New England and the Midwest. That's exactly what we're seeing. And we have very strong coverage, of course, for the Midwest. All of the engineers, for the most part, live in Ohio. So a number of those places you've mentioned, even during COVID, we've been able to send people out. They can drive to sites and actually work with our clients. So we found being positioned there gives us an advantage, right? We have local people who understand the climate, they understand the culture, and we think that's really important, right? Because that integration between us and our clients is really important. So we think we're well positioned. We're winning a good amount of share of those projects. We're also seeing quite a bit in Connecticut and New York right now. So we're moving into the Northeast, and we're actually looking at systems in Maine, which we haven't done yet. I think Maine has some of the heaviest and wettest snow in the world. I used to ski there, so I know it's pretty difficult. And we're seeing that growth in the Northeast as well.
You have a great map, which I'm going to show here in a second. But walk us through the Solar FlexRack product line, including your fixed ground mount solutions, and distinguish, if you would, the TDP and the TDP2.
Sure,
But yeah, why don't you start with your fixed tilt?
sure. Yeah, so again, the company traditionally was in the fixed tilt market. We had a number of different projects which we consolidated into the G3 series. That's kind of our third generation of ground mounts. So we have that product available as either a portrait or a landscape configuration. It is either pre-assembled or stick built. We have the ability to do both. We started our company with the pre-assembled rack, which was a fold-out rack, and we were very successful with that, mostly up in Canada. You'll see an awful lot of trackers installed in Canada, as well as fixed tilt. We've probably done close to 3/4 of a gigawatt in Canada, and with the high labor rates, that unfolding rack was a really great solution. It also worked pretty well in some of the more expensive labor markets in the U.S. But as we moved into the Southeast and the Southwest, they're very different markets. The labor is different. It's not as much union labor. So we decided to come out with a stick built or component type of rack, which is the G3, which is mostly what we sell right now. From there, we did move into the TDP space. That's the tracker, the TDP, what we call the TDP1 right now, was our first tracker product. It's driven by an actuator motor, and it can handle up to 60 modules per table. We still do market this product because it fits in many sites. It fits really well in high snow loads where you need short tables. It fits in kind of difficult topologies, like you just went by one there. So we still market that product. About 2 years ago, we introduced the TDP 2.0, which is really focused on the utility scale marketplace. That product can handle up to 90 modules per table. We're working on seeing if we can expand that. That is driven by a slew drive, which is a much more robust drive system. It's a fully balanced system, which really helps to reduce the dead loads on the system. The TDP1 is driven by an actuator, and this one's driven by a slew drive. We also have a really large practice in ballasted systems. We've done some of the largest ballasted systems in North America. That's a really great practice for us for landfills and just sometimes soils that you just don't want to penetrate for various reasons. And that's offered either a cast in place, which you're seeing in this picture right now, or precast. And this is a really, really well accepted product. That Annapolis landfill you're showing was at the time the largest project in North America. That's one that we did in Maryland. Fantastic project. And we also have a practice in ground screws and a number of other different types of mounting techniques. So we've done projects on round posts, ground screws, again, ballasted systems. Predominantly they're on I-beams, but this was a fantastic project we did. And that's up and running now as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, we've bid a couple of brownfield projects. We're looking at one right now in Colorado, and of course there are a handful of those here in Illinois. There are way more landfills in the world than most people know about.
Yep.
And here in Central Illinois, there are literally hundreds of landfills that could potentially be solarized. And luckily, we are solarizing the Urbana landfill, which is a closed municipal landfill right here in the city of Urbana. So thank you for that introduction to your product line. And slowly but surely, we are familiarizing ourselves. We haven't done a fixed or ballasted SFR project yet, but it's only a matter of time.
Mm-hmm.
So just to reiterate for our installer and EPC viewers, if they're looking at Nextracker or Array Technologies, who are the number one and number two on a global, basis,
Mm-hmm.
why are these developers and EPCs choosing Solar FlexRack?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we compete with them as well as others on a daily basis, and they're great companies. We have total respect for ATI and Nextracker, and I think the competition keeps people honest. It makes us spurs on innovation, makes us be very good at what we have to do, and I think that's good for the marketplace in general. I think when there's not competition, it's bad for the marketplace and it's bad for the clients. Our products are really well accepted, field proven. And we've really focused on not only great products, and they are really great products, but again, as I mentioned earlier, having a differentiation on the services side has really helped us quite a bit. We really stress the strength of our technical team. We have very well thought out processes. As I mentioned, our back-end Salesforce helps us to manage our projects really well. And having a team of, like I said, civil, mechanical, structural, geotech engineer, EE, a chemie, and our field services team, which is staffed by an electrical engineer and 2 civil engineers that go out to site, we really try to differentiate on the engagement. We say that if you work with us, we're going to take care of you from the beginning of the project to the end. And our focus is really on total cost of ownership, because sometimes the price on a quotation is a bit of an illusion. You might see a really low price. We've had people buy from others because the price was better. And we like to circle back after the project is completed. And we ask the question, did you really save that half a cent that you thought you were going to save? And many times, not always, but they say, no, there was actually an issue with delivery, or the design wasn't correct. There was mop-up cost afterwards. And it's really difficult to assess how much you might spend if a project goes wrong, trying to repair that, or maybe you got done the shipment doesn't show up on time, and you have crews sitting around waiting for material. Sometimes the material is not correct. But investing in that engineering team, and also investing quite a bit in our project management team. We have a fairly robust project management team that handles all of the shipments. And they work with the field services team to engage on the training up front as well. So we've really tried to differentiate not only in the product, but also on kind of that middle layer between the product and the client. And that's worked really well for us. And again, the result is a lot of repeat business from clients, because they go through the engagement with us. They say, well, that actually was different. You guys took care of us differently. We're not dealing necessarily with the largest projects in the industry. So a lot of the EPCs and developers we work with don't have a lot of this talent in-house. And our goal is to integrate our team with their teams. In other words, get our engineering teams to work together. And I always say, if you walked into a room with a client and our engineering team, if you couldn't tell who worked for what company, you've succeeded, because we try to take a consultative approach, make sure everybody understands what we're working with, what the challenges might be. And we'd like to head off trouble before it happens. So by really understanding the topography of a system, where it's going, understand the talent of the crew that's going to be installing it. We try to fill those gaps and make sure it goes smoothly, and that pays itself off in multiples, actually. So that's really how we differentiate. And again, I think we all have great products, but we try to go above and beyond that with our team and the people that we engage with.
Great. Well, thank you for that. And yeah, I would concur, that Solar FlexRack has a wonderful approach to project management. I've spoken to our PM team here at Continental several times about how that's going, working with FlexRack, and you do really stand out for your service. So keep up the good work on that front.
Thank you.
Let's talk about certification. There is a UL 3703 certification for single axis trackers. What is that, and why is that important?
Yeah, and we of course have always had UL certifications on the fixed tilt as well. Now we're working on that on the tracker. It takes care of, it ensures that mechanically, structurally, and electrically the system is safe, essentially, which is what UL is all about. They have the mechanical piece, which we're just wrapping up right now. We've already had the electrical piece done. We've actually commissioned projects which are 3703 compliant, and we should have the full certification done literally within weeks, I believe. It doesn't come up all the time, but there are certain developers and EPCs that insist upon it, and we're willing to make sure we have that in place. The other thing we see a lot too is a lot of independent engineers getting involved, especially on the larger projects. So we have a team of people internally, and we keep databases of kind of the questions we get asked. So if an IE does come along, they have a specific set of questions, we work with them to answer those questions. And we've never had a problem with that whatsoever. We've always been able to get through that gate. And it's a good thing to do because it keeps everybody honest as well. People are asking the right questions, and some have different interests than others, and we just try to address them as they come along.
So how difficult is it to get UL 3703 certified anyway?
I wouldn't say it's overly difficult. I mean, usually pretty sure that the bonding certification is a carryover from 2703. They had some specific requirements on wires coming out of the controllers had to support a certain amount of load. We didn't quite understand that, but we modified with our controls partner to make that assure that we have that. And now there's just some mechanical things where we're working our way through. So I wouldn't say it's overly difficult, but it is. It's a very efficient. It's a very arduous process to a certain extent because they're looking for a lot of data and they're being very safe about this, which we support. We want to do the right thing for the marketplace. We don't want anybody to get injured or electrocuted on site. So we just work with them very closely and the different houses that actually provide the certification and make sure we're meeting all their needs.
So what does the future hold for Solar FlexRack anyway?
Well, that's a great question. So, as we talked about, we're expanding our footprint. We're selling a lot more trackers. What we're doing now is we're getting involved with larger projects, and that's a result of having great products and services, but also really spending an awful lot of time, say in the last 12 to 18 months, Tim, on a supply chain. We have a much more sophisticated supply chain. We've hired the right talent to look at worldwide supply. And we feel it's a matter of driving down cost now, because once you have solid products and a solid reputation, it's all about cost. And solar is not getting any less expensive. We all know that the PPAs are becoming more challenging, which is great. It's fantastic for the industry. So we now have Asian supply, Canadian and US supply, which we feed the projects. We look at each project and try to optimize what's the least expensive path to delivering a low cost to a client. And we're at least dual sourced on every one of the components right now. So for us, it's a matter of driving down cost, continuing to innovate. We're looking at always looking at innovations. We have a development team, as well as our pre-sales and execution team, looking at what's the next feature we want to add on. Of course, can't tell you about those because those are kind of top secret. But we're continually working on driving down cost and looking at new ways of implementing systems. And that's what the future holds right now. We've got a great sales crew, got a great engineering team. And we're real excited about the future. We see a lot of growth, which we've been experiencing the last couple of years, and really looking forward to the future.
How do you see the relative role of fixed versus tracker playing out in the next 10 years?
Well, as I said earlier, I was a little surprised we started doing them in the Northeast and the Midwest. We knew it was coming, but we've dealt with it really well. It seems to me that the tracker business is going to continue to grow. Our fixed business is still growing as well, which is good. So that means that the whole overall company is growing, but it seems like the blend is more towards trackers. We're about 50-50 right now. And I think 2 years ago, we were probably 35-65 in favor of fixed, but now it's about a 50-50 business. I wouldn't be surprised next year if we're more like 60% trackers and 40% fixed tilt. That's just the way the market's headed.
Well, I don't think I have any other questions for you. What else would you like our viewers to know about Solar FlexRack? And then I'm going to make a few announcements.
Sure. So, just to the viewers, if you're looking for a supplier of fixed tilt or trackers, please contact us. We're confident that once you've worked with us, as Tim mentioned, you'll see the experience is different. We really do focus. Customer satisfaction is our #1 goal. That permeates the company from the ownership all the way down to the person on the loading dock. And we really train our people to take care of our clients. So if you want to get in touch with me, my email is sdaniel, SDANIEL @solarflexrack.com. Feel free to send me an email and we'll get somebody to work with you. And we'd love to try to make you successful on some projects. And Tim, thank you very much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's our pleasure, Steve. Really appreciate your time. I want to remind our listeners that you can find all of our live and pre-recorded events at cesnrg.com/podcast. Here you see Kimberly Centera with Terra Pro Solutions coming on to talk about risk mitigation for utility scale solar. Then we have PVEL with Michael Mills Price talking about the inverter and battery storage scorecard. And then at /videos, so cesnrg.com/videos, you get all of the recordings that we make, and we are publishing 2 or 3 videos a week. Of course, interviews like this that I'm doing with Solar FlexRack, and then also the Clean Power Hour that I do every Tuesday with John Weaver, who is a journalist for PV Magazine and a solar developer and installer in the Northeast. With that, I want to thank our viewers and listeners. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, and on our website, you can also subscribe for email updates. I'm Tim Montague. Let's grow solar and storage. Thank you so much, Steve Daniel.